it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game. Take me out to the ball game. Take me out with the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jacks. I don't care if I ever get back. Let me root for the home team. If they don't win, it's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game.
Welcome to Let's Get To, the baseball show from the fan's perspective. Let's Get To presents the first pitch. Opening thoughts from James Christopher.
And welcome to Let's Get To. I am your host, James Christopher, and we have a full episode for you today. I do want to welcome our new sponsor to the first pitch segment, the good folks at baseballmapper.com. Check them out. Their website is amazing. It was essential to us as we planned what will be a very busy 2021 summer on the road. But you might notice I'm decked out in Astros gear, and I don't often wear Astros stuff on the show, but they're not playing very well right now, and I'm trying to lend my support. You know, as when I record this, they've lost 7 of their last 8. Not great. And it's a real testament to how dedicated you are to your fandom. I am not a fair weather fan. I am not someone who can just give up on years of history, years of fandom because I'm angry at how they're playing. But you see this a lot. You see we live in a very temporary culture where people, I think, do find it easy to walk away from stuff when the going gets tough. And it's a concept, it's so foreign to me. And I think it's foreign because in the military, you can't do that. You can't bail on people just because things aren't going right because everyone dies. And I understand that it is a big leap to go from military service to baseball. Or is it? But no, when I see these people that are like, I'm not watching the Astros anymore and I'm not going to go anymore and blah, 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 blah. The first thing I think is, I don't want to be in a foxhole with that person. You know, I don't want to have to be in a situation that's dire and know that that person has a weak constitution and no integrity and is so quick to give up. And you see it happening with the Astros. The Yankees are doing that as well. And I also think you can't really enjoy the good times unless you really are supportive in the bad times, unless you go through it with them. And I think about my brother Tim and how he was at opening day, even for seasons he knew were 100 losses. He was there. And so when he got to go in 2018 and see the banner get unfurled, that's why that World Series will never not mean anything to me, because of how much it meant to him, how much it meant to Jessica and I, all those people who had been there for so long. I'm not saying you can't be angry at your team and you can't express the anger, because I do. I get on Twitter and say some stuff, and I don't care what smug newspaper reporter wants to tell fans that they don't have a right to be angry. Just like the Astros only get paid because I go watch them and buy this stuff, you, my friend, only get paid because we read your stories and follow you on Twitter. If all of the Astros fans decided that a certain beat writer from a certain newspaper wasn't worth it, we could all just decide to stop and he'd be gone tomorrow. But I digress. You're allowed to get on Twitter. You're allowed to be mad. You're allowed to be frustrated. As a baseball fan, you are often the worst treated when it comes to the sort of 3 points that make baseball work: ownership, players, fans, even though you're the most important cog in all of it. Now, what you can't do, I'm not a booer. I don't believe in booing. I don't think I've ever really been to a baseball game where I felt like I detected not the best effort. I know in baseball, sometimes you might get a game off, and that happens because there's 162 of these things. But on the other hand, I tend to not blame players anyway. I usually will get mad at managers for putting players in not a position to succeed, because that's leadership. I'm also certainly not a throw things from the stands at players because they didn't play well, looking at you fans from the New York Yankees. And yeah, that was definitely a minority of fans. I don't blame everybody, but that was ridiculous. Someone could have gotten hurt. You know, again, I use the analogy I've used before where, and this was the answer I gave, the standard answer I gave when it came to how I could still be an Astros fan after the revelations of 2019. And there's a lot of reasons why that I still am. And the fact of the matter is this, though. In my lifetime, my wife, my daughter, my nation, and my church have all disappointed me. They all have. I didn't bail on them. I'm not going to bail on my baseball team. I have disappointed my daughter. I'm sure that there will be some therapy moments with Jordan and I. I kid, but I've definitely disappointed her. And she's told me that. And I've definitely disappointed my wife. And not the way that some of you want to make a joke about, though. But no, I've definitely disappointed her. She hasn't quit on me yet. We don't quit on people. We don't quit on the things that we love. We muscle through, we support, and we find ways to affect change, but we shouldn't quit. And I think that's the fact that we can quit so easy is one of the things that I think bums me out most about sort of life in 2021. So that's it. I'm rocking this stuff because I support the team, and I'll always support the team. We do have a full episode for you. We're gonna have Reid Ryan on the show. We're gonna talk to the Keene Swamp Bats and so much more. So stay with us.
Holler and a Swaller, a chug of ballpark brew, presented by The Hitter Sports.
And welcome back to Holler and a Swaller. And pretty soon, we're going to be shooting this segment from a ballpark, and I cannot wait. I'm so excited. Now, this segment is sponsored by The Hitter Sports, and that's who I want to toast today. So first, we're going to start off with what are we drinking? This is, I've not had this before. It's called Alamo Bourbon. It's their black label out of San Antonio, Texas. It's a small batch bourbon. I'm going to be drinking it out of my, you really can't see, I guess, but it's my Houston Astros etched labeled whiskey glass. Again, new whiskey. I haven't had it before. Listen to that. Sometimes the way bourbon smells, it's illegal how good it is. So like I said, this segment is sponsored by The Hitter Sports, and I wanted to, first of all, turn this label so you can see it better. I want to, thank him for all of his friendship and his support, and it's been really awesome getting to know the guy, and it's now been over a year. I guess it's our anniversary. But I want to toast the Hitter, and I want to toast Mrs. the Hitter, and they're excited to have welcomed Teddy to their family, Teddy Hitter to their family. So. From Jessica and I and the whole Let's Get To team, congratulations, you guys. We're glad that your family is at least a little bit more complete than it was just a little while ago. So, again, a heartfelt congrats from all of us to you. Holler and Swaller, baby. This is one of the smoothest bourbons I have ever had. The rest of the segment's about to go downhill.
On deck, the Let's Get To interview.
So we are super excited to welcome to Let's Get To Reid Ryan. He is the former president of the Houston Astros and founder and CEO of Ryan Sanders Sports and Entertainment. Reid, how's it going?
Man, doing great. Just cool to be on the show with you, and life's good and doing well.
I wanted to start with an anecdote because I told my mom I was having you on, and my mom said, "Oh yeah, did you want to tell him about the time you called his dad old?" And I'd like to preface this by, grew up in the Astrodome. The first time I knew sports pain was '86. And when he signed with the Rangers, I remember crying in my garage. And then I just said, it's okay, he's too old anyway. And of course, shows you how much I know about the game of baseball.
2 no-hitters, 5,000 strikeouts,
Yeah.
300 wins later, huh?
And putting a certain Chicago White Sox in a headlock. So that's definitely maybe what qualifies me to not do a baseball show, but here we are with that. We're getting ready to get started. Major League's already kicked off. When you start getting in the mood, what is your go-to baseball movie to get you in the mood?
Man, that's a good question. I don't watch, honestly, a lot of movies. I love them. I love baseball movies. I wish there were more. I think Bull Durham is one of the most accurate movies I've ever seen. I love Field of Dreams. I think it's just a great movie in general. The first Major League is a lot of fun. But I'll tell you the one that just tickles me beyond belief now, having had kids that play youth sports, is Benchwarmers. I just think that movie is, I don't know, it's hilarious with the older kid, the man pitching at the end, drinking, and the whole deal. It's kind of like the guy that played for the New York team when they won the Little League World Series or whatever, and then had to give it back. So that's a great movie. Yeah,
no, I love that one. Those are all terrific choices. Right now, I'm sure the fan base in Houston is starting to hit a panic button after a rough couple of days. When do you think the sort of standard answer on the show is you don't hit a panic button until Memorial Day? What about you? Yeah. When would you start worrying about the standings of your team?
Sometime after the All-Star break is really where you're going to see where you are. I mean, this is going to be another one of these strange years. You saw what happened to the Astros this week with, all of a sudden a bunch of players being out. It happened to the Nationals, and they didn't start on time. So, look, these things, we're still living in a COVID world, although baseball is really in a lot of ways back to normal. It's not normal for those players. They're living in that bubble. So, with the expanded playoffs now and the wild card, look, I used to tell people, if you're 500, you have a shot at the wild card. Now, not every year, but you're within striking distance of the wild card. So if you can get, 162 game season, if you win 85 games, there's a good chance you're going to be in the wild card game. If you win 90 games, then you're probably winning a division or you're in the playoffs for sure. So you just got to keep it close. Second half of the season is really where, you need to make your hay, and we'll see how it goes. It's been interesting so far. I was looking at the standings, today, and, Dodgers really have been on a big roll. Surprisingly, the Red Sox have done well, but, the AL West, I mean, look, it's going to be an interesting year. Angels are looking good right up there with the Astros. The A's have obviously, kind of disappointed. And, I think the Mariners and Rangers are about where people thought they were going to be this year.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about as far as your time with, because you were the president of the Astros for it's one of the most important periods of its history. But, I was former military, and I remember leaving Bosnia in 1997, I think. Okay. I'm getting a medal from a sergeant major who was a big Yankee fan. And I remember him pinning on my medal, and instead of giving me these encouraging words, he's talked about how the Astros will never win anything and no one knows anything about them. This goes to my question, though. I want to thank you and say ask why it was so important for you to establish the Astros Hall of Fame, because I do think other baseball fans think we have zero history. And I love seeing that on display. Why was that so important to you?
Well, look, obviously it's interesting because I'm not there anymore. So, the things I did in my time there, 7 years as president, 8 years with the club, was really try to instill a sense of pride. I grew up an Astros fan in Alvin, and the team had some great players. Rusty Staub, Joe Morgan, Don Wilson, all the way to the Jose Cruz era, going up, Alan Ashby right into Mike Scott, my dad, Durker back in the day. But back then, only one team made the playoffs. It wasn't until, 1969 that you had two teams make the playoffs. And so even 80, 86, incredible years. How would that team have done if there had been three divisions? Astros probably would have been in every year and a wild card. They really would have probably been in most of those years. And as you've seen, these wild card teams have gone on to win the World Series here the last few years. So anything's possible. Having said that, these great players that stayed with this club for a decade in a non-ESPN, non-national televised every single game world, the East and West Coast didn't really know how great some of these players were. So if you're not willing to tell your own history and really create it by honoring these individuals, then people will forget about it. And so those were the things that I wanted to do, was celebrate the moments, whether it was Altuve breaking Biggio's single season hit record or winning, in my time there, he won batting titles. You had Rookie of the Years, both with Correa and Jordan. We had Cy Youngs, with Verlander and with Dallas Keuchel. So there've been some incredible things happen, and you have to take a moment and celebrate those. And really, it starts with a Hall of Fame, because not everybody's going to have their number retired. But people that play 10 plus years and give a lifetime to the organization deserve to be honored. And I'm glad that I was able to get that started before I was, shown the door.
You talked about the year being weird, and 2021 started no weirder than that. And I want to look at the minor league situation for a second, because it's something that actually is the lifeblood of our show, is minor league baseball. And with COVID and contraction, it's now been over 550 days, I think, since y'all have had a first pitch, outside of the Harryman last year. What do you think about the future of minor league baseball now, where it's been whittled down and we've seen, again, the changes in some of these small businesses are maybe hurting a little financially? How does it look to you?
Look, it's been hard. There have been some people that have been crushed by this pandemic, and there have been some people that have been crushed by the changes that Major League Baseball made. But having said that, change is good. Actually, I think there's been some good things that have come out of this. I really like the new scheduling that's kind of lined up, this AAA West that we're going to be in. We're kind of affectionately calling it the Pac-10 now, because we had 16 in the Pacific Coast League. Now there's 10 of us. It's really easy travel for the players. I think that's great. I think the scheduling and the way that it's going to go now, we have these 6-game series per season with a travel day. Don't know if that will continue to be 6, but I like the travel day. It's better on the players. I think it's easier on the fans. So I'm optimistic. I think some good things are going to come of this. Some of the teams that lost their affiliation either were geographically challenged or their parent club, or some of them just had stadiums that really had never had, any capital put into them from the local municipality or from the ownership group. And so sometimes those changes are hard, but they're needed. So as we come out of this, with every club having 4 affiliates, it really levels the playing field. But what I think it does is it really helps the higher revenue teams, because Tampa had a lot of minor league affiliates. Kansas City had a lot of minor league affiliates. Cincinnati had a lot of minor league affiliates. That's a way for them to develop talent and compete against the Yankees and the Red Sox and the Dodgers. Now, if everybody has the same amount of talent,
Sure.
I think it becomes harder for those smaller market teams to compete. So the game's strong. I like this draft league. I think that's going to be a really cool thing. We'll see how some of the other cities turn out with what they're getting and the type of baseball they're going to have. But at the end of the day, baseball brings communities together. And so I believe fans are going to flock back, because this divisiveness that's running around our country, that's really, brought on by, whether it's politicians or, established media outlets for ratings or, big tech or whatever. I just think it's terrible. And I think once people get back to the ballpark and they get to be around their fellow man and their neighbor, they're going to realize we all have a lot more in common than we do that separates us. And I think that's the beautiful thing about baseball.
I think that I couldn't have said that any better than myself. I wish that was the end of the interview. We could have just faded out there. That was
exactly.
In the movie world, that's a great way to end it. Ryan Sanders started out Ryan Sanders baseball. I mean, that. And now it's sports and entertainment. You guys do a lot for youth sports, between your Express Youth stuff with the Nolan Ryan Foundation. Why is it so important for you guys to invest in the beginning of our game?
Well, in a lot of ways, it's very self-serving. I'm just going to be honest. We're growing baseball fans, and the more baseball fans we grow, the more fans we hope we're going to have. So from a purely self-serving standpoint, there's a benefit to us growing youth baseball. But actually, I think the real benefit, and the thing that's like deep in my heart, is I think this game of baseball teaches everyone life lessons that are important for society, important for growth. And the number one thing is dealing with failure. If you're Jose Altuve and you hit 300, you're still failing 7 out of 10 times. And I know it's an old cliche, but it's hard. It's hard to hit a baseball. And the other great thing about our game is it doesn't matter how good you are. My dad used to tell me this all the time. Hey, I can strike everybody out, but if I don't have a catcher to catch the ball, they're going to keep going around the bases. If I don't have a team that can score runs, we're never going to win. And so baseball is really the ultimate team game, that a lot of times it's your weakest player versus the other team's weakest player. And it seems like that player always shows up. And so you have to rely on someone to pick you up. And I think that's great, because in society, none of us are doing it alone. And so you hear me talk a lot about these parallels, but that's why I think baseball is so important, is it brings people together. It spans the generations. It teaches people these life lessons through a game that we all need to learn. And I think more people that play it, the better they are, the more well-adjusted they are for the adversity that life will throw them. And so we're in a business that, we're trying to create more fans. Like I said, that's a self-serving enterprise. But I think the byproduct of that is the more people that are playing baseball, the better society we have. And the better society we have, we're all going to benefit.
Again, really well put. We'll wrap it up with this then. One of the things that I love about the Express organization is how welcoming everybody is from top down. You and I've actually met briefly in a hallway once, and you were nothing but nice to my wife and I. We were covering the game. Chris Almondaris is great. Andrew Feltz, we work really close with. You guys are going to finally be back at the ballpark. May 6th, I think, is opening day. I know that we're going to be there. What is the one part of the ballpark experience or the ball game experience you're the most excited to finally get to see again?
Well, to me, it's the people. This game is about the people. And I think the key to having a really good organization is you have to have people that love to serve others. And so I always tell our folks, and look, we work really hard to bring people in that are customer service oriented, because when people come to the ball game, they are giving us their money, and that's extremely important. But more importantly, they're giving us their time, 3 hours. And if we don't honor that time by giving them a quality product, a quality experience, and we don't do our job and actually thanking them and giving them the best customer service we can, then we're not taking care of what we can control. The Astros, the Rangers, the Royals, they may call up a player and all of a sudden we don't have somebody that we thought we were going to have. You may have injuries, things happen. What can we control? We can control the ballpark experience. And so that's why we work so hard at it. It's a great game because so many times people, they're forgetting their problems at the door, and they're coming in to be with their family, be with their friends, be with their loved ones. They want to be entertained. They want to watch young guys chase a dream. All of us had the dream of what it was like, at some point to be a major leaguer or an NFL player or whatever. So we kind of live vicariously through those guys when they're on the field. But more importantly, like I said, it brings the community together and it gives everybody something to cheer for. And so I'm excited about the year. We've got these alternate training site games going on now. So people that really want to get their early baseball fix, I think we have 6 left, can get out and see kind of what spring training games are like. And then when we get to May, we're going to open up at home with Oklahoma City. We got the Dodgers team coming into town. They're always a deep system. And it's going to be fun this year. And there'll be some new teams and some new faces. So we're excited about it. It's going to be a great time.
Well, Reid, thanks so much for taking the time, jumping on to Let's Get To, and good luck in the 2021 season.
All right. Well, best of luck to you, and Let's Get To, and hopefully we'll see you out at the Del Diamond.
Who's on first? The Let's Get To Local 9, brought to you by Zoomer Sport.
So we are super excited to welcome back to the show, friend of the show, Kevin Watterson. He is the head guru, the main bat, if you will, of the Keene Swamp Bats. Kevin, first of all, how great is it to know that baseball is on its way?
I can't even, it's hard to put it in words after 15, 18 months that we're actually going to be outside on a plot of grass doing what we love most.
With a diamond-shaped area of dirt. No, I love it. Before we jump into what 2021 is going to look like for you guys were doing a GoFundMe, a fundraising thing. How did that end up? How did you guys end up doing?
Our fan base, our former players really stepped up. We started out with a goal, Jim, of $10,000. We ended up raising almost $30,000.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, from our truly loyal fans and former players. So we're feeling good about accomplishing those tasks that we had in mind in the next few months.
So let's talk about 2021 then. What does it look like going forward? Do we know when we're starting, and do we know what seating capacity will be like?
So the good news is in Keene, New Hampshire, and the NECBL, we received our schedule last night. A little tardy, but we were kind of waiting on some exciting news that pushed us back a little. But we do have our schedules. We open up, this league does, on June 3rd, which is a Thursday. We play at home on June 4th and 5th, opening weekend. It's one of those grand weekends in Keene, New Hampshire. We will pack the park for 2 straight nights.
That's exciting. So what can we look forward to then when we get back out to the ballpark? Have you guys heard about seating arrangements or any of that stuff? What capacity will you be at?
We have. And the governor of New Hampshire, very, very, very progressive in terms of trying to get to what I'll call get back. I listened to Governor Sununu today on one of the top news sports stations in Boston, WEEI, and he flat out stated when asked that in New Hampshire we will be back in business long prior to Memorial Day. He's talking about, and so when he talks about capacity, today capacity is 50%.
Oh, okay.
Today, can you imagine in 2 months from now, I look for capacity to be at 75%. And so when we talk about capacity, we're talking about the facility itself. We don't actually sell out. I mean, our 1,500 to 2,000 a night that we get, we will be at our normal full crowd of 1,500 to 2,000. That we were on edge. We weren't sure where Sununu would go.
Yeah.
He did. He opened up vaccines for everybody in the country in New Hampshire. So players, you name it, citizenry can get their vaccines here, regardless of where they're from.
That's incredible news. Okay, so now you're business as usual. I know one of the part of what's exciting about running a collegiate summer league is you get to kind of preview the guys that will be in Keene through their collegiate season. So who's really got you fired up as you're watching the NCAA season for future Swamp Bats?
Well, we always have that contingent from University of Virginia, and we have 3 of their top freshman arms: Jake Barry, the kid named Mabe, and then a junior named Billy Price, who was going to be with us last year. All big kids, 6'5", 6'8", 6'10", and so we're always backboned by that type of arm. And this year we have a kid who we hadn't expected it. His last name's Corbett. He's at Louisville, who at last I looked, they were ranked 4th in the country. He's a freshman, and he's actually their closer, their number 1 closer. I noticed he gave up a run last week in 10 appearances. It was the first run he had given up. And so we are excited to have Corbett here with us this summer.
That is, I gotta imagine that's got to be one of the most fun parts about it, because running a team like what you guys run, there is a certain growth involved and a certain desire to help develop the ball player beyond just winning games. So it's got to be a lot of fun to see them kind of getting going in the regular season for them.
It really is. And hey, listen, we're competitive. So yeah, we want to win.
Sure.
But we also realize, our main purpose, in addition to entertainment value in community, is to help these big time players reach that next level. And that means doing the things that help them raise their game. And sometimes that doesn't include winning tonight's game.
Sure.
That pains me. Like an old school guy like me, we're going to forfeit a win, so and-so, doesn't have to pitch, 3 innings. But that's the reality of today. We're good with it. The good news is we have so many great players. So, player X often can replace player Y, and we don't miss a beat.
So let's talk about the entertainment part of it then. What do you guys have kicked up for the fans? I know you guys do a lot of great engagement on social media with folks. I'm still vacillating on whether I'm going to get to come out. I think maybe not 2021, but I'm still holding out hope. that you'll see me June 5th. I'm working some stuff, but just a little bit about kind of what we can expect from a fan perspective this year.
First of all, if you can't make it June 5th, we're okay with July 5th. Just as long as you get here, make good on your promise. But
wow. Okay. Wow. Oh, the gauntlet has been thrown out. All right. I respect the game.
I find we all work better with pressure, Jim.
You're exactly right.
So yeah, we understand totally that we need to entertain our fans not only with great talent on the field, but the entertainment that goes on. And so we've got the crazy, wacky stuff going all the time. We do this crazy thing called a tennis ball toss. We put an old car on the field. It drives around. We sell tennis balls before the game, believe it or not. We sell out 300, and then when it comes out in the seventh inning stretch, that's our seventh inning stretch, it drives around, and you'll see 300 balls coming out of the stands trying to get into the window. We split the cost that night. The balls are all numbered. You almost have to see it to imagine what I'm describing.
I want this. This is awesome.
I'll get some video this summer and forward it to you, and you can use it as a lead-in someday. We also do a great grand slam in the seventh inning. If a swamp bat player hits a grand slam in the bottom of the seventh inning, a fan who bought a lucky ticket, we sell what they call lucky tickets, gets a $5,000 check that night.
Has it ever happened? 4
times.
What?
4 times. Yeah.
So do you sit there going, hold on.
We have a great sponsor, Fenton Family Motors, who actually sponsors it. And I'm never sure if Bill, the owner, is rooting for us or against us.
Yeah. You can hit all the grand slams you want in the 1st through 6th and the 8th through 9th, but nothing in the 7th.
Oh, believe me, and believe me, we do announce it when all of a sudden the bases are loaded in the bottom of the 7th and one of our players is up. We say, fans, get your ticket out. We do some very meaningful, serious entertainment. We do a first responders night, which is always tugs at the heart, and a lot of Vietnam veterans show up, and it's a good night to recognize a different part of our community. We also do a lot of fireworks displays after the games. We host the city's fireworks on 4th of July.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. For a little town like Keene, New Hampshire, 23,000 people, 5,000 people show up for the game, and by the way, for the fireworks.
Yeah.
So, we never stop, and we do all the crazy stuff, the dizzy bat, all that between games, really for kids and to engage them. We do a thing called Reading with Ribby, where we recognize 1,500 students who achieved the reading demands of our program. So
I will say this too for you, Kevin. Like, of all the people I've talked to who are in ownership, you seem so focused on making sure the team is interacting with the community.
Yeah, it is really our focus. You can never take the baseball out. I always used to think if we had a losing season, of which we've only had one, I think, in our history, that the fans would still love us. We'd be the bad news bears. But last year, I did find out that, or 2 years ago, when we took a hard run at the playoffs and then won a championship, it was more meaningful to them than I had thought it would be.
Yeah.
It really did. Maybe it's because we hadn't won a title in 6 years, but that made me realize, you know what? I definitely need to put winning teams on the field. Don't have to win a championship every year. But what we do need to do, and we believe in it, and it's why our tagline is, it's community wrapped in baseball. Mm-hmm. We spend 80% of our time on community. The 20%, which is baseball, that's fun. Yes, it is. But it's not where we put our efforts.
Well, I want to ask you your final question. This is what I've been asking everybody. June 4th is there. It's your home opener. What are you looking forward to the most being back on the ballpark, back on the diamond?
I am most looking forward to watching our fans enter the park and get to hang out with their friends and neighbors for a couple of hours, which is what has happened here for 20 plus years, and which we missed last year. And I'm really going to just stand back and watch that with a smile on my face and I look forward to bumping elbows and fists and all that as fans come in the park, and just welcome them back to a little bit of dose of what it used to be.
Go Astros, a focus on H-Town hardball.
And we're excited to welcome Let's Get To. He's going to be helping us hold down our Go Astros segment. He is Brian Arbour. You can find him on @BreathingOrangeFire on Twitter. Brian, if we had this conversation a week ago, it'd be a much different conversation. First of all, how's it going up there with you?
So it is getting to be. So for those who don't know, I live just outside of New York City, where it is way too cold and there are way too many Yankee fans around here. I can't do anything about the Yankee fans, but I'm happy to say it's finally getting warm enough that I may be able to wear shorts this afternoon.
Well, good luck with that. You're right. This is a good news day. Yeah, the Yankees are maybe the only fan base feeling worse than we are. What has gone wrong in the last week?
So, so one thing I think is the first week was probably just too good and not an accurate reflection of where the team is. And the second week is too bad and not an accurate reflection of where the team is. And they end up, I guess the good news about having such a bad stretch is they're right about 500. They're not in a bad place long term. They had the first week that was great. That's probably enough. What's gone wrong? A little bit of everything, right? They haven't hit as well this week, particularly in the Tigers series. They haven't pitched as well this week, and that's been particularly notable in the bullpen in Seattle, where they weren't able to hold on to the lead on Friday. And then on Sunday, the bullpen was not able to sort of hold Brooks Raley wasn't able to hold the line when he came in relief for Jacob Rizzi in the fifth inning. That turned into a big inning. It was pivotal in that game.
So you talked about bullpen, you talked about offense. Which part do you think we're not going to actually be worried about a month from now?
I don't think we're going to be worried about the offense a month from now. Part of the problem in Seattle is, of course, you had, three key members of the heart of the order out due to the COVID restrictions. Multiple reports came in yesterday that those players are flying to Denver today, and assuming they can pass protocols, we'll see. We'll definitely see Altuve and we'll definitely see Bregman and Maldonado in the lineup, and then there's no DH in Colorado, so we'll see what they do with Yordan. By the way, not having Yordan Alvarez get 4 to 5 at bats at Coors Field is one of the best arguments for the universal DH.
Yeah, and I've not seen him at all listed anywhere on the, hey, this could be the cool home run derby, and I'm like, why not? How big a problem is the bullpen going to be, and are you feeling comfortable knowing that there are reinforcements on the way?
Yeah, so the bullpen is, first of all, not as, there's this sky is falling sense that I've gotten on Astros Twitter, particularly over the weekend. And, I'm not here to tell you the bullpen's doing good, but I've taken a look at the numbers on the bullpen. They are below average, but nowhere near the worst in Major League Baseball. And that's kind of what we expected them to be. That's sort of where they were projected to be at the beginning of the season. Fangraphs listed them as sort of the 23rd best bullpen, and they've actually been slightly better than that in some of the measures. The good news is, as you said, right, that you've got several guys on the injured list you expect to get back sometime over the next month, particularly Pedro Baez, who was their big signing in the offseason to provide reinforcements in the bullpen. Anoli Paredes had a very bad opening to his season. Hopefully he's going to get healthy on the IL. You bring them back, and that will hopefully provide a bridge to Ryan Presley, who's been very good when he's been able to get in games, but he only has one save because they won a lot of big games, and then B, have had a lot of close games where they're ahead.
I am not, or I don't know where you are on this. I don't know if you're a big question to manager guy. Do you at all get the feeling that Dusty doesn't actually understand the 3-batter minimum? I saw a quote, and I'll say I saw a quote that he kept, I think it was Stanek into the following inning after he closed it out because he said he had to deal with the 3-batter minimum. Do you get that vibe at all?
Dusty's never had a great reputation as a game manager. Dusty's won now 1,900 games as a manager, mostly because he is someone who keeps the clubhouse in good shape, keeps his players positive on a keel, doesn't let sort of bad stuff fester on itself. And that being said, Dusty doesn't have great options. If you look at sort of what the plan was for the bullpen, it was for Baez, Paredes, and Smith to be sort of the main setup men to get you to Ryan Presley. Well, Baez and Paredes have been injured, and Joe Smith's the one sort of name in the bullpen that I'm particularly worried about, not just because he's performed poorly, but because of his velocity is down, I think two miles per hour on both his fastball and slider since 2019. So that's the player I'm most worried about in the Astros bullpen long term.
Yeah, let's talk about that then. I share that concern with you. I was so relieved when he was coming back, and he looked really good in his first appearance. And then he looked really good, I want to say, against the Angels. He had a bases loaded, maybe one out, and got out of the situation. But he's looked awful. Do you think there's a way back, or is this just sort of no more tread on the tire situation?
He's going to get a long leash for a couple reasons. One, he's done this for a really long time at a really high level. Two, when he's on, he's really deadly to right-handed hitters because, of course, that sidearm action is really sort of hard for them to deal with. So I suspect they're trying to work with him. But again, he needs to get his velocity back. He needs to get his velocity back up. And that's the real sort of question I have about, his sort of long-term viability.
Let's do some tinfoil hat stuff. There's been a lot of talk on Astros Twitter. I'll be honest, I contributed to some of it. Do you think that MLB is doing a good job of handling the COVID situation with consistency? Some teams are forced to play, some teams aren't. And do you think the Astros should have at least been able to postpone that first game against the Tigers, the first game that they were sort of infected?
I think it's worth noting as you compare. I've taken a look at this because I've seen, the many people on Astros Twitter and my friends in my text threads complaining about MLB's consistency. The Astros had 5 players out, which obviously is a big blow. If you look at the Nationals at the beginning of the season, they had 11 players who weren't able to play in that initial series with the Mets. If you look at what's going on with the Twins right now, they have 3 guys on the roster and apparently an additional person who've had a positive COVID test. The Astros only have 1. So as frustrating it is not to have some of your best players in the lineup over the last couple of games, and as frustrating as it is that, Major League Baseball has told the Astros, hey, you got to go play. There's no clear evidence to me that Major League Baseball is holding a double standard on the Astros. The Astros COVID issues are less severe than they are for the Nationals or the Twins this year. So hopefully the 4 guys who flew, that would be Bregman, Alvarez, Maldonado, and Robel Garcia, who are flying to Denver today, can pass through protocols and therefore be activated and placed on the roster today. The big thing I'm looking for from Major League Baseball, and this is something that's been, has been sort of frustratingly imprecise, is are the Astros going to be able to take the players they brought up to replace the COVID 5? Are they going to be able to remove them from the 40-man roster? Major League Baseball's protocols say if a bunch of players go out and you sort of have to do this, they'll sort of give an exception to the regular rules about having players go through waivers in this process. James Click, in his press conference on, I believe, Wednesday last week, when they put the players on the IL, said that this is the type of case that's likely to be that, but we haven't got any confirmation from Major League Baseball or anybody in the Astros that they're definitely going to be able to do that. That's the issue I'm looking for, particularly today.
That concerns me too. The fact that there wasn't an immediate, yeah, you guys are good. Like, why wasn't that thrown out? How would that work then? Would that mean that, I guess, Taylor Jones and Alex Degody were the ones not on the 40-man?
Yes.
They be the ones put through waivers, or would they have to drop 2 more or could they pick 2 different guys that maybe are less important to the club's future?
It sort of depends on, and then you got to look sort of more precisely and sort of read through the lines of MLB's protocols. I've read through this sort of section once, but I'm not a lawyer and sort of, probably need one to sort of read through it in that detail. Let's see. So Taylor Jones was on the 40-man roster. Degody wasn't, and I'm trying to think who else they brought up.
Dawson, maybe?
Yes, Ronnie Dawson. That's right. And so, yeah, just the expectation, if you just take them off the 40-man roster, they go back to their status as, minor league players. They should get service time for this. And I'm sure the players union will advocate for that. But from an Astros standpoint, that's the issue I'm looking for in Major League Baseball. We should get clarity on that sometime this afternoon.
I certainly hope so. Okay, so as we look further, and like I said, we're going to be visiting with you throughout the whole season. What is the ceiling for this team, in your opinion, and what is the floor?
The ceiling would probably be something like 95 wins. Most projections at the beginning of the season had them in the low 90s. They're not a 100-win team. They're not the team they were from 2017 to 2019. They had 3 straight 100-win seasons. That's done very rarely in Major League Baseball history, and I hope people enjoyed and appreciated that. It's tough to do, but they are the best team. They do have the best talent in the American League West. I do think they're the favorites in the American League West. What's the floor? Well, last season they were below 500. They were 29-31 during the regular season. They probably weren't as mentally engaged last season because they had the cushion of the 18 playoffs. So they probably weren't as intense, particularly in September, as they were trying to get through the end of the season. And they certainly turned up that intensity in the playoffs. So I don't think they'll go below 500, but something like 82, 83 wins is the floor. So there's a band there. Most of that band is in the playoffs. Some of that is not. That's what we're going to see this season.
Okay, let's talk a little bit of just the reaction to the sign stealing as we wrap up. You're one of the reasons why you're on the show, and this is my big compliment to you, is you're one of the most intelligent and reasonable Astros fans out there. How frustrating is it to see guys booed who were in the minor leagues in 2017?
Booing is not a act done of I'm a college professor. When I go to academic conferences, we don't engage in a lot of booing. We engage in sort of different forms of sort of criticism if we don't like someone's paper. It is not sort of an act of sort of high-minded rationality. So yeah, like in a world we would like, Todd Callis had this great comment on the broadcast on Fridays. Like, the Mariner fans are really upset with something that Jason Castro did while he was with the Minnesota Twins in 2017.
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, and Angel fans were booing Martin Maldonado for playing on the Angels in 2017, I guess. But it is an act of, I'm not going to say irrationality, but not sort of high rationality. In short, the Astros as a team, this is in essence one of their punishments for having engaged in the sign stealing is sort of getting booed. What I do have this sense of is that it's a less intense thing in Seattle than it was in the first 2 series. And I think it'll be less intense in Colorado because why do Rockies fans greatly care about, a team in the other league in another division? Obviously, they're going to play in New York next month, and that will not only be a big story among the fans, but certainly among the New York media, and that will sort of ramp things back up. And who knows if we'll see more inflatable trash cans thrown on the field, or Yankee fans threw balls on the field. So apparently Rougned Odor went out there and swung at them and missed. So standard as always.
Let's Get To presents Good Wood, knocking around the majors with Andy Tomchessen.
All right, so we're jumping into Good Wood, and this is going to be very Astros heavy. Andy Tomchessen's here. Andy, we actually have converted some of our Yankee friends at Before the Pitch who didn't believe that there has been a team-long, history-long conspiracy against the Astros. We can now add to that, can't we?
Where do we even begin? I'm glad that the Hitter Sports finally is understanding what we're talking about after, I think, 2 years of you trying to convince him this was a real thing.
Yeah.
But the most recent example that we have, what we're talking about today, is this the handling of COVID outbreaks on teams, or contact tracing in the case of the Astros. Every other team who has had 2 positive test or COVID issue or contact tracing issues so far this season has been allowed to postpone at least 1 game, if not 2, or an entire series in the case of the Mets and Nationals, I believe, at the beginning of the year. Most recently with the Twins this past weekend. The one exception to that is the Houston Astros were expected to play a series minus 4 starters and a utility man, and had to play that game the same day, literally 2 hours after they found out that the players weren't going to be available.
That's the thing that I think troubles me the most. Okay, so devil's advocate is the argument is that the Twins and the Nationals, I think it was the Nationals, had confirmed positives, and the Astros, at least publicly, have not announced any positives. What I don't understand is in a virus that's been hard to predict, how could they have really assumed 2 hours was enough to make sure the game was safe to play in the first place? Conversely, I don't know how contract tracing works necessarily, but I would have thought all the pictures of everyone hanging on AJ Hinch might have fallen into contact tracing as a possible spreader event.
I mean, one would think, and it's not that I necessarily have enough medical training to understand that one way is better than the other. Certainly, we aren't privy to the actual who tested what when. We don't know who patient 0 was in this latest Astros event. What I do know is that Major League Baseball handled it differently than literally every other case so far this season, and there's been more than a couple. So there's even an umpire. Unfortunately, it wasn't Angel Hernandez, and that's a horrible joke. So we should not root for people to get diseases. I only root for Angel Hernandez to have an immediate and prolonged retirement.
We want him to live. We just don't want him
just elsewhere
doing this anymore.
Away from Major League parks.
What have you seen as far as how Major League Baseball has explained itself regarding how the Astros were treated differently, and do you think it was enough?
Was there an explanation? I don't think there was an explanation, which I think is part of the issue. And I know under Rob Manfred, there has been simultaneously a push to consolidate the power of baseball into this one baseball. But for Major League Baseball, that literally means we want the Major League office to handle all major decisions. Versus when he doesn't want to talk about something, he pushes it off to the teams, saying that, well, the Astros made this decision based on our recommendation, but that was their call to do.
Which we know was false, like Lance McCullers is the player rep.
Right, which is 100% false. And that's, part of the problem is that you're either the federal government or your state's rights. You can't really be both, especially when it comes to a pandemic and how you're going to react to it and still play games. So if a New York team, for instance, has 5 cases of COVID, they're going to be allowed to postpone games. Everybody should be allowed to postpone games. You already have rules in place to figure out how you're going to deal with those postponed games by extending the 7-inning doubleheaders and some other things that they put in place. So why the Astros, who admittedly are struggling, and this isn't the reason entirely that they're struggling by any means, I'm not making excuses for that, but it's a world of difference going to play in Seattle, going to play any team in the major leagues, down 4 starters, 3 of which are all-star caliber players.
One of the things that I think really kind of gnawed at me about it is again, it's everything about Major League Baseball. It's a lack of consistency. I could make the argument that COVID is now a year old. There should be no postponements. You just have a bigger taxi squad and you keep sending dudes up unless you just run out of players. It does seem like it should either be that, or if you've got players, I mean, talk about the players union, and this is what frustrates me, because essentially the story goes is that Ronnie Dawson and Taylor Jones and Alex Tagoti jumped in a car to get there and made it within an hour of game time. How are they supposed to – how is that putting them in the best position to succeed? The players union is so culpable in this, and they're basically getting a pass.
Well, I think the players union is culpable, and they always get a pass because there's, 1,000 players, 1,000 different hands to feed in the players union. And so when you have an organization who's set up to feed so many disparate interests, despite the fact it should be one common interest, that there's never going to be consistency, and they don't honestly want to have any responsibility. They want to be able to walk in, come in at the end of the process and try to fix things by complaining and filing suits and threatening work stoppage and other things like that. It's the lack of culpability, I think, goes to Astros management as well, because I think Jim Crane and to a lesser extent James Click have to be able to push back on Major League Baseball and say, we're not playing this game. It doesn't make any sense for us to play this game. Oh, and by the way, here's the precedent that you set 2 weeks ago and repeated the week before and did right after ours. It's that's got to be part of it. And I think Crane, and we've had this conversation about other topics, is so in Manfred's pocket that he can't speak out about anything to the benefit of his team because he's not going to be allowed to anymore.
Do you think the algebra in that changes if we find out, like, how is it a different situation if we find out there were no positives at all and it was purely contact tracing? And that, in my mind, that means, okay, you have a negative test and then a negative test and you're good. Versus we find out that there was, in fact, a positive and they still played. How does the algebra in that change?
And I could be completely wrong on this, but part of the issue is that Major League Baseball doesn't rely on rapid swabs like a lot of us do. If we think we're exposed, we would go get a rapid swab to at least say, okay, I have this or I don't right now. Maybe we follow it up with a PCR that takes a little bit longer or not. But they can't turn those PCRs around using the labs that they use in 2 hours to one of your original points. There's no way they made that decision that same day and got results that said you should be, quarantining anybody or not quarantining anybody. They didn't have enough data to make that assessment correctly. So it becomes this issue of consistency. If the tests take 24 hours to get back, then there should be at least a postponement of 24 hours because you just don't know. And so if you don't know, you have to assume the worst. That's what planning is, and then adjust from there versus, oh, well, it's just the Astros, and they're not in the media market anybody gives a shit about, and they're playing the Tigers, and nobody cares about them either. So let's just let them play.
Is that why? I mean, is that is it are we dealing with the same whole dismissive of the Astros that we've seen, that we've talked about from you will open the roof during a World Series to you will play a neutral site game in Milwaukee against Chicago? Or is this 17 coming back? Which is it?
I think that under Jeff Lunau's guidance, and I'm not blaming this on him, but under his guidance, the front office in Houston lost a lot of credibility with Major League Baseball. And credibility in this instance is just simply there's a lot of people who are unliked. So I think James Click has kind of an road to hoe, so to speak, in regaining that respectability. But I think it comes back to Jim Crane as the owner, as one of the 30 most important voices in Major League Baseball today, to be able to tell the commissioner, who is his employee, by the way, that we're going to operate under the same rules that everybody else is going to operate under. Crane is only interested when there's championships and cameras to be standing in front of.
Right.
Beyond that, it is another one of his lines of business, it feels like, that he occasionally gets involved when it benefits his personal PR. I think that he has given Click some guidelines to work under, and this is probably a Go Astros segment, and that is hamstringing some other things that I think Click would be more adept at doing that he's just not allowed to do yet or at all. But I think the ability to communicate directly and bluntly with Major League Baseball and make the point for your team, because the Twins aren't a major league market or aren't a major market for baseball. They're not the Dodgers or the Yankees or the Mets or the Red Sox or the Cubs even. They're the Twins. They're probably in the same boat as we are, maybe a little bit worse because they have a smaller media market. But the Astros continually get dumped on in these situations because we have such a bad relationship with the front office of Major League Baseball. So I think it is some of 17. I think it is some of 19 and us yelling at reporters as an organization and daring people to find out that we were cheating and what they did.
Well, none of that should matter when we're talking about a health pandemic. I mean, and that's
you're absolutely right. It shouldn't matter, but I think it does. And I think that's the big problem with consistency is this thing, excuse me, I want to cut that. This thing, dealing with a pandemic, is completely above and separate from any other issue that should be happening in baseball, either past or future. This is a public health issue. You're going to have fans in the stands. You're going to have concession workers. You're going to have ticket takers, even though that's very virtual now. You're going to have players. They're all in the same building, even at reduced capacity.
Yeah.
You have to, from a planning perspective, be consistent in your application so you know how to deal with stuff when it hits the fan. And you can't deal with things effectively if you're not consistent. And that's where baseball has found itself, is that we still want to punish the bad orange team bad, hashtag. And it's coming out in other areas where it should never come out in. It would be tantamount to saying the Astros have a different luxury tax threshold than every other team because of something they did 5 years ago.
Yeah, that might even be more acceptable as a here's your
exactly. That would at least be a punishment that didn't have something to do with people potentially living or dying. And I don't mean to cry, the emergency of death with COVID, because I think it's proven to be mostly survivable, especially among athletes. Sure. But it does get that deep for some people. We do have a 160-year-old manager sitting on our bench.
Who thinks he's still managing in 1997, but that is a Go Astros segment. Last question then. We clearly saw the results of that ball game. I don't think anybody thought there was even a reasonable chance of winning that ball game. Lance McCullers meltdowns or no, when the fact is that that's because even if you weren't caught up in it, there's always people going around in your head going, what if I did? What if I got exposed? Well, all this stuff. They weren't in the right mind to play.
Right.
Would you suggest, if you could go back in time, that they just pull them off the field, refuse to play? Would you suggest that in the future if it happens to another team? If you're going to take the L regardless, at least take the L without risk to injury and able to make some sort of point.
I think under the auspices of the health of your players and your organization, and I mean actual physical health, if Major League Baseball is not going to treat you the same way they're treating the Mets and the Nationals and the Phillies and literally every other team, then you walk. I think we'll take the forfeit. It's not our players' lives, our players' health is more important than you proving a point in Major League Baseball.
Yeah, I think the thing I keep coming back to is those kids that drove up from Corpus who were – this was so last minute. They were in the starting lineup for the Astros Rangers alternative site games. So I think the whole thing is dangerous. How much longer do you think we're dealing with this? I know that the Astros are supposedly – now they're just sort of waiting on the calendar to roll over for them to have hit the full immunity when they get their second shot. How much longer do you think this will be a thing?
I think for most teams, they're on the same schedule. I believe, and I'm not 100% certain about this. I know it's one of the two. They either all got Pfizer or they all got Moderna. And I think Pfizer was what they were. Except for Lance, who somehow got his 2 weeks after everybody else, but his was a Johnson & Johnson. I don't know where Lance went or didn't go. They didn't mandate vaccines, which is a whole separate conversation, and I'm fine with that. There's certain personal liberties piece that I understand, even though they would have been within their rights from a labor organization standpoint to require vaccination of their players. They didn't. Most of our players in Houston got vaccinated. They are, I think, have 2 more weeks before they can get their next dose, and then 4 weeks after that, 3 weeks after that to full immunity. So, like a lot of other things, it's going to hit around Memorial Day when things get back to normal. And I hate to keep using that, but it's the honest truth. It's just Memorial Day. Nothing matters before Memorial Day.
Let's Get To presents the McEntire Mule, the Scott McEntire baseball experience.
All right, we're jumping into the McEntire Mule, and Scott's coming to us from this amorphous void.
My hands are blurry, and then they're in focus. I had to change a setting, and, sometimes when you change settings, it just crazy things happen. So we're just going to live out here in the world of make-believe.
What's crazier, your settings or moving the mound back an inch?
Great segue. Yeah, it's kind of like we teed that up there.
Yeah.
Moving the mound back an inch wouldn't bother me, but that full foot, foot kind of bugs me a little bit, man.
To fill people in, one of the rules that the Atlantic League is supposed to experiment. Now, look, I'll be honest. I want to say in 2019 it was supposed to take effect in the second half of the season and did not. It's now going to take what's that?
They were doing 2 feet to begin with. Remember, they're going to move it back to 62 feet, 6 inches. And players went nuts over that and said, that's going to kill us. We can't do that. So now they're just going to reduce it.
If they do, my point is they were supposed to remove it once. They didn't. Now they're supposed to move it again at the All-Star break.
That's right. Yeah.
Why is this a colossally bad idea?
Man, I think you're trying to fix a problem the wrong way. I think you're trying to change the rules of the game without really addressing what the problem is. So what is the problem, right? What is the problem? Well, Theo Epstein, who's now an MLB consultant, has said that the problem seems to be that there's just not enough action going on, that there's too many strikeouts, that this is, the pitchers are dominating the game. So, if you think back to 1968, this was the last time anything ever happened with the pitching mound or the rubber or anything. They lowered it 6 inches from 18 inches to 12 inches because in 68, Bob Gibson had a 1.12 ERA. The Yankees as a team hit 214. And Carl Yastrzemski won the AL batting title with a 301 batting average. And the second best guy, Danny Cater, hit 290. So, okay, we've got a bit of an issue here. Sure. People also weren't just kicking back and swinging for the fence every time, trying to maximize launch angle and velocity. They didn't know that. They were sleeping off of yesterday's hangover and just trying to put the ball in place so they could get a paycheck. You look at 2019, well, the worst batting average for a team was 236. Okay, fair enough. Detroit was absolutely horrible with their K to strikeout ratio and just, they got on base like 29% of the time. So, there was a colossally couple of bad teams hitting that year. There were 4 teams that batted under 240. Ks were at an all-time high. So after they lowered the mound 6 inches from 68 to 69, well, the lowest batting average now was up at 225. Bob Gibson had a 2.18 ERA. Carl Yastrzemski, by the way, hit 255 that year rather than 301 the year before. So, Carl, I guess he'd like to see him coming down. But anyway, they did something because there was a legitimate problem. These guys had too much. They were throwing, honest to God, they're pitching downhill. Now we're looking at moving it a foot backwards so we can generate more action. But batters aren't just trying to put the ball in play anymore, Jim. Yeah. They're not. That's the fundamental part of this that I think is getting missed is that the average hitter is more interested in generating speed, exit velocity, and launch angle rather than bat on ball, put the ball in play. For many of these guys, there's a whole half of the field that's not even got a fielder over there.
Yeah,
they could just reach out and punch the ball that way. If you want to create, action, but instead, what it looks like is that Major League Baseball is not addressing the problem that for a lot of these guys at the plate, it's about me rather than team. And
I'll be honest too. I also know that when they go to arbitration, those numbers you just pointed out, exit velocity, barrel rate, those are the things that are put in front of them when they're told to give less money. I get what you're saying about the players, but it's the culture of the game that's caused that. One thing I wanted to ask you, my big red flag, you're a former professional pitcher. Can you imagine being told, hey, you're now going to pitch a foot back? Are we asking for injuries from some of these guys that have been throwing from a certain distance all of their lives?
1 foot, I don't know if 1 foot's as much as 2 feet. I do think that this has a propensity to backfire horribly on baseball because not only does the batter get a foot more time to react, but there's a foot more distance where a pitcher may not hit the zone. I mean, there's not that many guys throwing strikes as it is. Now you're going to make it more difficult to throw strikes. I think you're going to see, walks go up, strikeouts go down, and everybody says, "Yay, strikeouts going down." But
walks if you're slow the game down even more.
Walks are going to grinds it to a halt. And I just don't think that people are addressing that. The injuries, it absolutely could, because a guy's going to try to throw a little bit harder if he's getting hit, and I got to get that 1 foot extra.
Look, I can't throw a breaking ball, right? But I would imagine you throw the breaking ball with a certain velocity or a certain strength to get it to break at the right point, and now you're asking your body to adjust to have it break 1 foot farther into the zone. I would imagine that's going to cause you to emphasize certain parts of your motion, maybe, and now you're putting stress on parts of it that maybe you weren't putting stress on before.
Yeah, I think what you really look at there, whenever you're getting out of the curve, it also depends on the velocity in which you're trying to throw it. What's a slider look like with its late break versus a curve or a slurve or a 12-6, whatever you're throwing. You're not going to necessarily try to get extra out of it. You'll be releasing it at a different point. You'll have to adjust a little bit to where you do release it. I also think that the slower curves that you see a guy like Adam Wainwright or Zach Greinke, guys that throw the ball a little bit slower, but they move it more. I think you're going to see them struggle with that. And potentially hang more, just because it's got that extra foot of break. I don't know. I mean, and I may be making something out of nothing here, but I do think that it alters the way you're throwing every pitch other than a fastball, other than a four-seam fastball, if you want to know the truth.
Yeah.
Because of, even a two-seamer, if you've got a cut on it where you're cutting into a right-handed hitter, it's going to cut in a little bit more. I will tell you that I heavily relied on a two-seamer when I pitched, and that would absolutely change the way that I attacked. I would attack the outside more, because the pitch could cut back in and really never hit the zone but fool an umpire if I get that extra foot. However, the inside part of the zone with the two-seamer is all but not, because it's going to break out of the zone, and a hitter has a little bit more time to see that. A lot of people are saying, well, guys are throwing harder than ever now. This shouldn't be a problem. Guys are just throwing harder. Yes, that's somewhat true, but people are not throwing as harder as it looks like on paper. Okay, you look on paper and you see guys like Jordan Hicks hitting 103, 104, 105. You're like, nobody ever touched that. But they're measuring the velocity at a different point than they ever did before.
The fastball, I think they did a thing where they compared like Walter Johnson and Nolan Ryan, and said if you use the metrics today, Nolan Ryan was hitting 108. So
right, exactly.
So they have been throwing this hard for this long.
Yeah, and guys can adjust. I mean, guys will adjust. They can catch up with whatever we've seen that. Guys can still do that. If for the majority of the average major league hitter, they can put a ball in play whenever they want to. I mean, that's obvious. The art of the bunt is gone away, right? Nobody bunts with runners on first and second anymore, just to move guys over to second and third. So why don't we try to say, hey, you know what? You guys are dropping the attendance ratings. You guys are raising the average age of the fan. You put the ball in play a little bit more, guys. Why don't we reward that? Instead, what they're doing is rewarding the long ball, and you had an average exit velocity of 102.7 miles per hour on balls that were barreled. I'm sorry, my brain is freezing as I talk about this. So we're going to reward you heavily. Now, we know you hit 204, but man, a lot of those balls went right at guys. Yeah, because there were 5 of them standing on one side of the infield, because everybody within a 40-mile radius knows that Matt Carpenter is going to pull the ball. Really? You got 2 hits on a year. But this is actually a good example. This is actually a good example of Matt Carpenter, okay, who has been a good hitter throughout his life, but now the book is out. Everybody's over there on the right-hand side. His 2 hits all year, Jim. One is a bunt, and the other one went 400 feet off the foul pole. or the fair pole in this case. That's feast or famine. But how many times did all he have to do is just slap it the other way? Just let the wrist sit back and go the other way.
Even Astros slugger Jordan Alvarez, who is having a great season, was in an 0 for 10 and threw a bunt down just to like get him going, because they're gifting him. So I do want to, as we kind of wrap up, I do think ultimately you're right on one thing. I think baseball at its best, when it's 90s National League style, for the college parlance, Augie Garrido style baseball, hitting and running and moving runners and always having action on the base paths, that's more exciting to watch than sitting back hoping that Bregman hits a bomb or Aaron Judge hits a bomb or whoever.
Yep. Whitey ball of the 80s was very exciting to Cardinals fans. It was exciting to Royals fans. Before that, you had other people doing the same thing. Get people moving, get the ball, get people on base. Meanwhile, at the same time, you still had people, you still had teams trying to use the mentality that we're using today. You think about the Tigers back then with the Steve Kemps and Alan Trammell's and those guys. They weren't just about batting average. The Brewers, for crying out loud, with Dave Kingman in Seattle as well when Kingman was there. Sixto Lezcano, I'm pulling some numbers and names out of the brain at this point, but you had guys that were trying to launch the ball for freaking ever, and they might hit 240 with 40 home runs, and the team didn't make the playoffs. The guys that made the playoffs were the teams that were stealing 20 or 30 bases per player and hitting 260, 270 and having more doubles than home runs, and pitching and playing defense. And fundamentally, if you want to,
pitching gets better, right? It all gets compressed.
Yeah. I mean, you're using your better. Yeah. By that point, the best teams are playing, and you're using your best pitchers. I just think that if this is an indication of what Theo Epstein is going to cook up, I guess I'm losing hope on what I thought Epstein was going to be put in place for, because it really looks at this point like we're trying to fix problems outside of the game, fix problems through rules that the game itself could police and dictate, if they would reward the type of behavior that they say they want to see.
That's it. Nail on the head. He is Scott McEntire. This is the McEntire Mule. Scott, we're going to have next week off, but we'll be back to kick off the minor league baseball season.
Hee-haw.
Hee-haw.
And now, on to close it out, the right-hander from Houston, Texas, James Christopher.
So that does wrap us up on this episode of Let's Get To. Really quick programming note. We will not be back next week. We're going to take a week off, and then we're going to be back with a double-sized episode to kick off the minor league baseball season on May the 4th. We might even talk a little Star Wars. Now, it might surprise you to know that I'm a learned guy. I enjoy literature. I read. I even enjoy poetry. And it is, in fact, National Poetry Month. It's the month of April. And I wanted to share with you a poem that my mother-in-law Cheryl introduced to me called The Double Play. It seemed fitting for a guy who does a show called Let's Get To. And so I give you The Double Play by Robert Wallace. In his sea-lit distance, the pitcher winding, like a clock about to chime, comes down with the ball hit. Sharply, under the artificial banks of arc lights, bounds like a vanishing string, over the green, to the shortstop magically, scoops to his right, whirling above his invisible shadows. And the dust redirects its flight to the running, poised second baseman. Pirouettes, leaping above the slide to throw from midair across the colored, tightened interval. To the leaning out first baseman ends the dance, drawing it disappearing into his long brown glove. Stretches. What is too swift for deception is final, lost among the loosened fingers. Jogging off the field, the pitcher walks, casual, in the space where the poem has happened. I quote Billy Beane, who says you can't get romantic about baseball. That is our show. Hope everybody has a great week watching some ball games. We are so close to Minor League Baseball getting started. So get out to the ballpark, get yourself some Cracker Jack, get yourself some popcorn, but most importantly, let's get to